The downfall of American heavyweight boxing. Over the recent years, there's been a lack of heavyweight boxers, especially ones who are big names and champions. And if you look over American boxing history, there was nearly always a boxing superstar in every era of heavyweight boxing. From the start of formal boxing and the first ever heavyweight champion, you've had John L. Sullivan, who started the lineal champion in the heavyweight division, and this is in the 20s. After this, in the 20s, there were Jack Dempsey. In the 30s and 40s, you had Joe Louis, who's one of the first boxing superstars, winning 66 fights, only losing 3. After World War II, you had Rocky Marciano, known for being incredibly durable and a true star in boxing. Then coming after this towards the 60s, which was a great time for American heavyweight boxing, where it seemed if you were a good heavyweight boxer, you only could be American. And at the start of the 60s, you had Floyd Patterson, trained by the legendary trainer Cus D'Amato. Then you had Sonny Liston, who reigned until he got beat by the most well-known boxer ever, Muhammad Ali. He was more than just a boxer, he was a social icon and a great speaker, which had just never been seen before in boxing. And started like the era of trash talking and, digging into your opponent, which we see today all the time. In the 70s, during and after the reign of Muhammad Ali, you had George Foreman and Joe Frazier, who both fought Ali, which were some of the biggest fights ever in boxing, with numbers never seen before. Coming into the 80s, brands were coming into the sport with the belts. You had the WBC, WBA, WBO, all coming into boxing. And a few changeover of the belts after Muhammad Ali, with Larry Holmes dominating at the start of the 80s, came the best and arguably most well-known champion, bar Muhammad Ali. You had Mike Tyson. Iron Mike Tyson became the youngest world champion ever, and is still the youngest ever world champion, under the guidance of, again, the legendary trainer Cus D'Amato. And it really shows how important these great and iconic trainers were to create champions. This was the start of one of the most iconic eras in boxing, where once again the USA dominated. Mike Tyson kept the heavyweight reign until the biggest upset in boxing ever, to Buster Douglas. After this, Mike Tyson would go to prison in his prime years, which really held back the legacy of Mike Tyson. It could have been bigger, but because he went to prison, he wasn't as big. Evander Holyfield, a heavyweight great, also claimed the title during these years. Other champions in these years were Ray Mercer, Tommy Robinson, Riddick Bowe, who weren't even the pinnacle of this era, but right now would they be the boxing superstars. This just shows how stacked USA heavyweight boxing was in the 80s. During the mid to early 90s, the Canadian/British boxer Lennox Lewis came into the scene, and it was the start of the downfall of American boxing, and it was starting to crack from American boxing. In the mid to late 90s, there were some of the greatest fights and matchups ever in the heavyweight division, where you've got iconic fights like Mike Tyson versus Lennox Lewis, also the Evander Holyfield fights where it got a bit naughty and a bit choppy. Evander Holyfield was the champion at the end of the century and the last real American superstar in the heavyweight division. At the turn of the century, the Lennox Lewis era was well and truly in its stride, and it saw the end of American heavyweights as Lennox Lewis, after beating Vitaly Klitschko, he retired in the mid-2000s, and this started the Klitschko brothers era, which is seen as one of the most worst eras in heavyweight boxing, mainly because of the lack of American superstar spice in the division. There was only a few Americans in the 2000s, with Roy Jones Jr. bringing the Americans back a bit, but after he left, it was truly gone, and we haven't seen a true American heavyweight superstar all throughout the 2000s and 2010s, with the likes of Povetkin, David Haye, Klitschko and Valuev being dominant. The only American champion in recent times was Wilder. Although he did have the famous WBC belt, he was by no means a superstar, as no one in America even knew who he was, and it took him until he fought Tyson Fury to get his name to becoming big. So then now, we are in the current era of heavyweight boxing. After Wilder's loss, we haven't seen one American champion, let alone a superstar. with AJ Fury and Usyk holding all the belts. Even the challengers currently are not even American, with all of them either being British, European, or even Chinese and from New Zealand with Zhang and Parker. Currently, American heavyweight boxing is well and truly dead. The only hope they had was Jared Anderson, who had a lot of hype around him and was set to be America's next world champion. But a few weeks ago, we saw Martin Bakole upset the story and showed that Jared Anderson will not be champion, or at least not now. I think he still could do something in the sport, but he won't be a champion anytime soon. So then, what is the future for America in the heavyweight division? Well, they don't really have any upcoming boxers at the moment, even in the amateurs. And at the Paris Olympics, there weren't even any Americans competing in the heavyweight or super heavyweight division. This all goes to show how important I think these iconic trainers and boxing gyms are to the American heavyweights. There used to be people like Customato, and you had the famous Kronk gym. And now there isn't really much, and they all cater to the lighter weight classes like the Mayweather gym. There is also the fact that for a lot of Americans, the UFC is a better and a more exciting option to go down to, with stars like John Jones. And if you are a taller and bigger guy and want to go into sports, in America a lot of them would rather pursue the MMA, NBA, or NFL. All well and said, we won't see an American champion for a long, long time, which apart from America's sake, isn't an issue, because the current heavyweight division is in a great state and one of the best it's ever been since the 80s. But it does mean the American eyes aren't on heavyweight boxing, they're more focused on the UFC. Thanks for watching, boys. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.